Today, the Department of Justice filed 3 federal charges in United States District Court against Cole Thomas Allen. The first count is attempted assassination of the President of the United States, stopped because of the courage and professionalism of law enforcement. The officers who responded without hesitation and did their jobs as they were trained to do.
4:52 a.m. California. According to federal investigators, the suspect in the White House correspondent's dinner shooting had allegedly planned the attack for weeks, traveling across states with multiple weapons before opening fire at a secured location. Just hours after his arrest, agents executed a raid on his residence, where they expected to find digital evidence, planning material, and possible indicators of coordination. But what they uncovered, it raised even more questions about how the attack was actually organized. This wasn't just a lone actor with a motive. This was something much more calculated. Like and subscribe if you want to understand how this case unfolded, because the deeper they dig, the more the official story begins to shift. The neighborhood didn't wake up to noise, it woke up to movement. Unmarked vehicles rolled in quietly from both ends of the street, cutting off access before anyone inside the house could react. Doors opened almost at the same time, and agents stepped out in silence, positioning themselves with practiced precision. No sirens, no commands shouted across the street, just controlled coordination tightening around a single property that only hours earlier had been connected to a violent incident drawing national attention. By the time anyone nearby realized what was happening, the perimeter was already sealed. This was not a routine search. This was a targeted federal operation. The house belonged to the man now in custody following a shooting at an event attended by Donald Trump. What had unfolded at that event was chaotic, fast, and unpredictable. But for investigators, the real concern wasn't just what happened in those few seconds. It was what had been set in motion long before that moment ever occurred. Because the timeline, it didn't start at the scene. It started days earlier. Travel records showed movement across multiple states. Vehicle tracking data indicated repeated stops that didn't follow a direct route, and purchases were made at different locations, spaced out over time. Each one was insignificant on its own, but together, they formed a sequence, a pattern, and that pattern pointed back to this house. At approximately 4:52 a.m., the operation shifted from surveillance to action. The breach signal was given, entry teams advanced immediately, and the front access point was forced while secondary units secured the rear, ensuring no movement in or out. Inside, the first impression was almost disarming. Everything looked normal. Furniture was in place, personal belongings were undisturbed, the environment reflected routine, not urgency. But operations like this are never about first impressions. They're about what doesn't stand out. It didn't take long before the first layer of evidence surfaced. Firearms were located in separate areas of the residence, not stored together but positioned in a way that suggested access rather than storage. Rifles, handguns, and ammunition were distributed throughout the home. This was not a single weapon scenario. It was a prepared environment. As agents moved deeper, they found the digital layer. Devices were secured quickly, phones, storage units, systems that had not been wiped or damaged. That detail alone carried weight. There had been no scramble, no attempt to erase, which meant either there had been no time or no expectation that anyone would come looking. As the search concluded, the tone of the operation shifted. Every item recovered added another layer to the timeline: movement, access, preparation, decision. Each step leading forward toward a moment that had already happened. The residence was fully secured, the evidence cataloged, but one question remained unresolved. Was this preparation carried out alone, or was there something else behind it? Because what agents entered that morning was not just a house, it was the starting point of a timeline that is yet to be fully understood, and everything they recovered. It suggests there is still much more to uncover. By the time the residence had been fully processed, the investigation was no longer centered on the shooting itself. It had shifted to everything that came before it. Because the evidence collected inside the house was no longer being treated as isolated findings, It was being assembled into a structured timeline built from numbers, movement, and repetition. The first layer came from the weapons. A total of 3 firearms were recovered, 1 semi-automatic rifle and 2 handguns. All were legally purchased, but they were stored in separate locations throughout the house. Alongside them, agents found more than 320 rounds of ammunition divided across multiple containers. Not centralized, not secured, but positioned for access. This was not casual ownership. This was distribution of access points. Then came the written material. Investigators recovered 17 pages of handwritten notes and printed documents, some containing fragmented references to locations, others listing sequences of movement. While incomplete on their own, at least 9 of those entries were later matched to confirmed travel stops identified through vehicle tracking and transaction records. That was the first confirmation. The notes were not abstract. They were tied to real-world movement. Digital evidence expanded the timeline even further. Forensic teams identified more than 42 search entries related to locations, travel routes, and event logistics, all within a 72-hour window prior to the incident. More importantly, metadata confirmed that at least 11 of those searches were conducted between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. This indicated deliberate late-night planning rather than casual browsing. The movement data was equally revealing. Using license plate tracking and transaction logs, investigators reconstructed a route spanning approximately 1,300 miles across 3 states, completed over just 4 days. During that time, the suspect made 8 confirmed stops, 5 separate purchases for fuel and supplies, and 3 location overlaps with areas referenced in the notes. Individually, each movement appeared normal. Together, they formed a path that ended at the event and began at this house. Financial records added the final layer. Investigators identified approximately $6,800 in total transaction activity leading up to the incident. None of the individual transactions exceeded typical thresholds. Most ranged between $40 to $300. It was controlled spending, deliberately kept within normal patterns to avoid attention. This was not a single decision made in one moment. It was a sequence built over time where each step was small enough to remain unnoticed until they all converged. At that point, the investigation moved into intent. Federal teams reviewed communication logs extensively, but no evidence of a coordinated external network was identified. No large-scale organization, no command structure. But that absence did not simplify the case, because what remained was something else, a fully self-contained process. Planning, movement, execution, all carried out without triggering a single detection. That raises a serious concern, not about networks, but about capability. The system uncovered here did not rely on complexity, it relied on simplicity. Small transactions, legal purchases, standard travel, each step individually harmless, but together forming something far more dangerous. The house is now empty. The evidence has been removed. The suspect remains in custody, but the timeline remains, and it tells a story that goes far beyond a single event. Because the most dangerous part of any incident like this is not the moment it happens. It's everything that happens before it.